I want you both to pretend to act like, oh no, here he goes again, sort of thing.
Okay. I'm sure we can pretend that very well. Welcome, this is Evolution to Temporal Discussion, the episode-by-episode Nightmare Retrospective podcast. I'm Martin Harder, and everything I do it for you, but I won't do that. Oh no, I won't do that.
I'm Kim Stewart-Crossley, and what I'm discovering is if you have nowhere to hang a banner, you may as well wear it.
And I'm Martin Odoni, and I'm from Exeter. In fact, the fact that the present team is from Exeter, of course, means they are all clearly incredibly bright, intelligent, fleet of foot, and cool as cucumbers that have just been made professors of cool at Cool University's Department of Ultra Coolness under the tutelage of the cat from Red Dwarf, Zaphod Beeblebrox, and Shaft.
Today, we're taking a look at Series 5, Episode 8, which was shown on CITV on Friday the 25th of October 1991. We've actually found the TV listings for this date. Just before Nightmare, you were probably watching Cosgrove Hall's cartoon Victor and Hugo.
But then, of course, you knew that already, didn't you?
Martin, as I already mentioned that on Episode 6 of this series. Victor and Hugo was also on directly before Nightmare Series 6. I used to watch it and enjoy it well enough as a prelude to Nightmare, but really I think the title characters do work better in their original bird forms, Gaston and Pierre in Count Duckula.
I tell you to do for me one small thing, one small tiny thing, and what do?
I don't know. What do I do, Gaston?
You don't do it! That's what!
No, don't, do I?
I love Victor and Hugo.
It was fun, wasn't it?
I've got a weird one for me, this, because I don't actually remember it, but I do remember enjoying it.
It's a weird feeling when you get that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the nostalgia without the memory, which is very odd.
It was a bit of a weird one because it was actually derived from Duckula, although in Duckula the characters were animals. But in Victor and Hugo, they were the only humans in a world full of animals.
I see. So you're saying that Count Duckula and Danger Mouse were normal?
Topping the charts was still Bryan Adams with Everything I Do It For You. We said all we can about this song, however, I did note when I was checking this up, storming up the charts and happily nipping at his heels is an absolute Eurodance banger. It's a classic. It's Get Ready for This by 2 Unlimited.
It's one of those ones, you don't mind it, but once it's in your head, you can't get rid of it, and you do get really irritated with it after a while.
It just reminds me of every Amiga game from the early to mid-90s.
You're not wrong.
I think actually the sound synthesizer on the Amiga was rather more advanced than the one that 2 Unlimited were using, but maybe I'm just a bit of a cynic.
At number 1 in the box office is what I will call the fantastic musical journey of The Commitments, directed by Alan Parker and starring Robert Arkins, Michael Ahern and Angeline Ball. I always find it kind of interesting how low down the billing Andrew Strong actually is, but him and his voice carry a lot of the film.
Yeah. I like The Commitments. I've only seen it a couple of times, but it had me laughing plenty for it. Wonderful the way they're able to have them performing in perfect harmony, song after song after song on stage. And as soon as they're backstage, they're ripping each other's throats out. That's how bands really are, though, isn't it?
It is. I think it's when you get a lot of strong personalities in one place, isn't it, Mr. Odoni?
Yes, well, thank goodness we don't suffer from that problem on this podcast.
But no, it's, I did find out after kind of looking it up and doing a little bit of digging, Andrew Strong's so far down the bill because it was his first ever appearance on screen. He was actually the son of the vocal coach.
Oh, right. So it was all nepotism that got him into the industry in the first place. I see.
Basically, his dad went, "Do you fancy having a go?" And he went, "All right then," from what I could glean from the internet. And he's still singing now.
Nice.
If you book him, it's like Andrew Strong, the voice of The Commitments. But yes, I also like The Commitments. I've seen it a few times. It's another one where I don't think anything really goes anywhere. There's no big sort of deep, meaningful plot, but it's a cool film and there's some good music in it.
You're listening to Temporal Discussion, bringing you the latest news from 1991.
There were several major events this week that stand out. Firstly, and very bleakly, on the international scene, there was a massive earthquake. 6.8 on the Richter scale in Uttarkashi, which is a province in northern India. The quake struck at 2:53 a.m. on Sunday, the 20th of October, near a densely populated part of the Himalayas known as Garhwal, which is basically the province immediately next onto it. But it was close enough to all the villages that were in the area, because there were nearly 1,300 villages in that area. So it was, although they were only villages, it was very densely packed. All of them were affected. The quake is said to have peaked at Mercalli scale intensity 8, which basically means really severe shaking. So there were around 40,000 people who were made homeless as the houses were shaken to the ground. 768 were confirmed killed directly by the quake, with over 5,000 more injured. So this really is a disaster that should be more famous than it is.
Mm-hmm.
It became prolonged, though, due to the extreme damage to the local infrastructure. There were avalanches blocking up roads and what have you, roads getting cut up and sort of torn apart by warping and what have you. And that massively hampered the emergency response. Many more were to die in the days and weeks afterwards due to untreated injuries or loss of shelter. The overall death toll is not known, but it's estimated to be in excess of 2,000. So it was actually quite a disaster.
Yikes.
That's heartbreaking.
And it's rather sad that it's been so forgotten. I think that most people have forgotten about it before the end of that year. It does make me feel ashamed on behalf of the rest of the world that it very quickly sort of vanished to the small print.
Yeah.
The second news item, not forgetting the earthquake there, but the second news item is a much happier one. It's the end of a free century in justice. If you've ever heard of a guy called Chief Justice Hale, you probably hate his guts, and correctly so. He was an English Civil War judge who put 2 women accused of witchcraft to death and established the very evil principle that there could be no such crime as spousal rape in England and Wales. Hale essentially interpreted the oath of marriage as consent within the law to sexual intercourse on the part of the wife any time her husband felt like it. So the real man for the ladies, this Mr. Hale. I'm sure you agree.
No.
On the 23rd of October 1991, a case called R versus R, the identity is withheld for obvious reasons, was appealed. A man had initially got off his charge because he tried to claim exemption from an attempted rape of his own wife. On appeal, the judges ruled unanimously that spousal rape is a crime, after all, overturning Hale's appalling ruling at long last. And since then, a husband who doesn't treat his wife with bodily respect no longer gets away with it. I think that's certainly something to be happy about.
Definitely.
In fact, I don't know about you, but it makes me quite queasy to think that this archaic principle depriving women of bodily autonomy was still in effect in this country after my 16th birthday.
It's frightening when you sort of think, like, we're all of a similar age, not identical, but similar. And if you think back to what's occurred with that sort of thing during our lifetime,
Definitely.
I just sort of think it's like we say that the world's come so far, but it's really only been in the last, 40 years maybe?
And we've still got a way to go as well. At the moment,
We really do.
this podcast hates one of the writers on Father Ted and J.K. Rowling because of their attitude to transgender people.
Exactly.
But for now, one thing I can say is, thank heavens for the 23rd of October 1991. Oh my goodness, the idea that a woman, because she's married, doesn't have the rights to decide what happens to her own body, it is so scary.
In the past sort of 10 years or so maybe as well, might be a little bit more, that has been extended to partnerships, not just marriage,
Yeah.
which is even better.
It is quite terrifying realising how anti-liberal this country can be, because you don't think of it while you're growing up.
In a sort of, like, it's a good thing that it exists, but like a sad thing for me. I got a really nice necklace that just says "My Body, My Choice" on it, and I have to think about where I wear that.
And you also have to think about how many women not so long ago would not have been allowed even to suggest that.
And even now in certain places, I'm pleased with the progress that the country's made, but we got a way to go.
And now time turns. The recording light burns. Timeout is gone. The podcast is on.
Good. They're here, Pickle, so we can get started.
Ha! I don't think we should wait for them next time, Master. I can't stand people who can't keep appointments. Can you?
No, Pickle. Or is the name possibly Kettle? You know, the one the pot called black? Oh, never mind. Let's to it. The boys are waiting. By the way, who are these boys?
Jonathan, Ray, and John, Master. They're from Exeter, Devon, guiding their dungeoneer, Ben, in a bid to redeem the shield. 28 minutes into the quest, Master. Level 2, carrying a horn and a book. Not for much longer, I suspect. Sylvester Hands looks set to rob 'em blind.
Pickle seems weirdly pleased at the prospect of the team being robbed by Sly Hands. Let's see if he gets his wish.
Game on.
My name is Sylvester Hands. That's what it is. You know, hands like feet, but down the other end of your body. That's my little joke.
Vermin. stand right where you are, or the first one that moves becomes an oversized pincushion.
You notice what a terrible start the hosts have there with them both speaking to the wrong camera.
I noticed that when I was watching it.
The episode begins with Ben being accosted by Sylvester Hands in the Staghead room. There's a blanket in the bottom left-hand corner. Gwendolyn enters and orders both Sly and Ben to stay where they are. When she briefly turns her back, Sly throws the blanket aside. Underneath is a copy of the Helmet of Justice. Sly puts it on his head and rushes back to where he was standing.
I think that was the Helmet of Justice from season 1 and 2, and then it was falling to bits a little bit, so they had to make another one for season 3. And then they decided to use the original one as a prop on the floor whenever there was a ghost and there was a skeleton on the floor.
Yeah.
Fire cave in season 3. As far as I know, the original one no longer exists. There's one that fans of the series seem to get a turn having possession of that's lurking around there and getting passed around a bit, but that's not actually the original. It was the second one.
It's still a cool thing to have.
No, of course. It's still a legitimate, genuine prop, but it's not the very first one.
I'm tracking a nasty little sneak thief who goes by the name of Sylvester Hands. Now, which one of you is Hands?
It's him! It's him!
Despite the fact that aside from the helmet, Sly is wearing exactly the same outfit as was when Gwendolyn entered. And he quite clearly just has this huge beard sticking out the bottom of it as well.
Yeah, an obvious dungeoneer, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say it, this scene makes Gwendolyn look unbelievably stupid.
It does.
No, I agree.
I'm going to point out as many of those examples of her being stupid as I can as we go through them, but she is just made to look thick.
I don't think there's that many examples. It's just this is a terrible set piece.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. The set pieces often make the characters look a bit dumber than they really are, but this one, it really does.
Even the advisors are sniggering.
Yeah.
Until she's like, hey, I'm going to ask you some questions. And then they just...
Nothing against Juliet Henry Massey, but I think part of the problem is that she's not good enough at improvising to be able to sell the scene.
That's fair.
This is one of the examples I was thinking of when I said that in an earlier episode, that she doesn't really know how to improvise. She doesn't really think on the spot very well. But whether she does or she doesn't, the fundamental concept here is just still makes Gwendolyn look stupid. And we know from previous scenes she's not that stupid.
Yeah.
My name, it's Ben. That's what my name
You're
is.
Ben, what's your name?
Say you're Ben.
I'm Ben. How can you be Ben when he's Ben? What's your name?
He's lying.
My
He's lying.
Ben. He's Sylvester. What's your name?
Ben.
He's lying.
I don't like this.
He's
I don't
lying.
like- Be quiet.
Ask him his second
I
name.
don't like this at all. Personally, I'd pull off your helmet and have a look. But the powers that be don't allow it.
How can you be Ben when he's Ben? I don't want to keep copying her. I really don't, okay? But firstly, that doesn't sound scripted. It sounds like she said it on the spin. That has got to be the most childishly bad bit of improvised dialogue from an in-game character. Not just in Nightmare, but possibly in the history of interactive fiction. In fact, it's even making the production team look dumb. The concept of two people having the same name is treated as a logical impossibility in an episode when two of the advisors are called John.
Nightmare's never been one for having like a one Steve limit.
It's crazy, isn't it, Martin?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. One of the advisors did come up with a reasonably good idea.
Yeah, but the problem is, what's to stop Sly from making something up? Gwendolyn doesn't know Ben's surname.
She's not going to know any better, but then again, Hans probably wouldn't think of it. It's too intelligent for him.
Gwendolyn decides that the best way to weed out the imposter is to ask all together, gentlemen, three riddles.
She calls them questions.
They're questions, but never mind. I thought I'd take the opportunity. She has apparently heard that Sly is stupid and Dungeoneers are clever.
This must be the only time in history that a dungeon character has suggested that Dungeoneers are supposed to be clever. Gwendolyn is that stupid, in fact, isn't it?
Bless her.
You know, we got to disguise that superficial. No attempt by Paul Valentine to disguise Hans' voice. This whole need to test them to find out kerfuffle. She just seems dense.
It just proves, though, that the best kind of disguise is a hat.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing I will say in defense of Gwendolyn in this scene, she gets double entendre of the week for I'd pull off your helmets.
Sometimes I do think you are reaching for double entendres, but you really didn't have to reach very far for that one.
No.
Right. I'll set a test and that'll reveal the culprit. 3 questions. Here's question number 1.
Give the name of a female deer.
Sly says Bessie.
Ben says doe, which is, of course, the truth.
Yep, doe is indeed a deer, a female deer.
And what is a drop of golden sun?
Ray, yes. True, accented.
In the legend of the swan song, when is the only time a mute swan sings?
Sly immediately answers with when it dies, which is the truth. This is where we actually get the word swan song from, and I never actually realised that until I researched this. But the swan song legend is an ancient romantic story that states that swans sing a lovingly haunting melody immediately before dying. The concept stretches back to classical antiquity, including references to something I can't pronounce. Aeschylus, Plato, and Aristotle. The belief was most likely based on the silent nature of mute swans, who were considered to be voiceless throughout their lives before producing one final tragic yet lovely song as they died. Although factually incorrect because swans actually make a heck of a lot of noise.
Yes.
The notion of a final burst of beauty before death has persisted in art, music, and philosophy.
And sports commentary.
Yeah.
The easiest parallel to draw is probably the dying swan from Swan Lake.
Yes, exactly. I think Swan Lake is very much based on the legend, isn't it?
I think Swan Lake is basically what brought the saying back into popular usage, in fact.
Yeah. The best dying swan solo that I've ever seen danced was by La Trocadero de Monte Carlo. Go and see them if you ever get the chance. Everyone, you guys, listeners, everyone, go see La Trocs. Brilliant.
The best I ever saw was Jurgen Klinsmann playing for Tottenham Hotspur, but that's another story.
And also Ed Edmondson did it on Let's Dance for Comic Relief, which was brilliant.
I should just mention on the subject of Ed Edmondson, he's actually a director of Exeter City Football Club, so that makes him class anyway.
I enjoy that tenuous link to Nightmare right there, Mr. Odoni. So from there, Sly goes on to say he ate a swan once, for which he receives what was probably a kick in the shin, but from our viewing angle looks more like a swift knee to the old goblin horn.
It really does though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah, and that's why we like it. But Hans has grown really thick in the space of half a season, hasn't he? He'd never have been so stupid as to talk about eating animals in front of Gwen.
But he's grown thick between his last appearance and this one.
Yeah, it's one of the tragedies, because I actually thought his earlier appearances in this season, I thought he was quite interesting. He was cowardly but sneaky, and there was an element of threat from him.
Putting the helmet of justice on was actually a good move. That was a clever move because it obviously fooled Gwen.
Yeah, and he knew the answer to the riddle as well. So there's signs that his intelligence there, but he just doesn't seem to be thinking all of a sudden.
He's gone goofy.
I still like Sly Hans as a character, even when he does go full stupid.
How many days in February when it's a leap year?
Ben answers 29, which is the truth.
February has 29 days in a leap year because of how the Roman calendar evolved. Originally, it was the final month with 28 days. When Julius Caesar established the Julian calendar in 45 BCE, he fixed the year at 365.25 days, or 365 and a quarter days, adding an extra day every 4 years to account for the additional quarter day accumulated each year.
And that caused an anomaly in the other direction, because there's actually about 11 minutes, a year is actually about 11 minutes shorter. But I think it was the 8th century, the Venerable Bede had noticed that the equinox, which is supposed to be the 21st of March every year, had slipped backwards to about the 14th of March.
Yeah.
Because these 11 minutes were adding up every year, and so after 700 years, that's an awful lot of minutes being added on. In fact, it's a few days worth.
February was already the shortest month, thus the leap year was allotted to it, giving it 29 days in leap years. And later the Gregorian character was created in 1582, and that improved on the system, retaining the leap year, but correcting the century years divisible by 400. This keeps our calendar synchronized with the solar year.
That's why the year 2000 didn't have an extra day in it.
You have delayed too long in this chamber. The manifestation is now occurring.
Yes, it's me, Jake Collins, manifesting on the podcast once again to tell you stuff about Nightmare. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that if you're looking for a little balance in your life, or specifically in the critical analyses you listen to of Juliet Henry Massey's performance as Gwendolyn, go and have a listen to me and Amy on episode 4 of this series for a rather different take on the whole thing. There are a few interesting things I want to say about this scene with Gwendolyn. I remember being very surprised first time round to see her appearing in a dungeon room. She's the Greenwood, and I thought we'd always see her in the Greenwood. And she does address this in what she says to Ben. She says her job is to keep vermin like Sylvester Hands out of the forest, but she also has to come into the dungeons as well to get them out. That, to me, provides an image of Gwendolyn's life, professional life at least, being something of a vicious circle. If she's chasing vermin like Sylvester Hands out of the forest, where are they then going to go? Into the dungeon. So if she then comes and gets them out of the dungeon, they're just going to go straight back into the forest, aren't they? I really do prefer to see Gwendolen in the Greenwood. I do think it makes a lot more sense, and indeed, this episode contains the only 2 occasions on which Gwendolen is seen inside a dungeon room. Anomalous occasions, really, and yeah, that's not where I like to see her. But as I mentioned on episode 4, I do actively like to see her in the Greenwood. I love how Gwendolen mentions the audition process here. Dungeoneers have to go through some sort of selection process. As I've mentioned before, I love those links to the real world that sneak into Nightmare that the characters are aware of. And that reminds me of one thing you can no longer tell, sadly, from Ray's photos now that they are song captions, unless you happen to know the area very well, of course, which is that the Nightmare audition for Ben's team took place, if my memory serves me true, in Maidenhead, Berkshire. So not very local to Exeter, but certainly a lot closer to Exeter than Norwich is. Finally, while we're on the subject of Gwendolen, let's take this opportunity to thank friend of the podcast and future guest host Rosey Collins for providing even more vocal variety on this episode by reading Gwendolen's questions for us. And indeed, let's thank her for doing the same thing on episode 1 of this series while we're about it. And thirdly and finally, let's thank Rosey for her occasional role that she's been performing recently as editorial consultant to Temporal Discussion.
Slynose is being beaten and scarpers before Gwendolen can react. Instead, she leads Ben into the Greenwood, and during the passive path that follows, she tells Ben that the password for the level is Morning Star.
And the ISHIELD sequence is too long and slow again.
Yeah.
But at least there's something sort of going on during it with giving them the password and blah, blah, blah.
It gave it an extra dimension, I guess.
Yeah.
At least we got hoofbeats instead of wolves this time.
A bit of variation is always a help.
That leads us to the woodland clearing.
Ben, you're in a clearing.
I hear hooves. Rider coming. Now get behind me. You're too vulnerable in that helmet. This way. Yeah, behind me.
Tarantara! 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 Hello, hello! 'Tis bold Sir Hugh to rescue you!
In the underworld? Oh, heck, Master. It's that idiot Sir Hugh de Pinbrain barging in.
Witless Pickle. Master. No, Witless is his name, you idiot. Come to think of it, you're both idiots.
Look, I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but we don't want rescuing, so just clear off.
What, no rescuing? Nay, but I insist. Neddy, Steve. Damn fine charger there. Damn fine filly in prospect here, or me name's not the bold Sir Hugh. Of course, you may call me bold, miss, if you like. Well, enough of the girlish vapours. Now let's get to the rescuing part.
You're not listening, Tinbrain.
I liked Sir Hugh and I don't like Sir Hugh in this.
There is something slightly uncomfortable about this scene. Normally, he's very likeable and amusing. A guy with obsessive-compulsive rescue disorder is quite a clever notion. But there is something rather paternalistic about the way he talks to Gwendolen in this scene.
Yeah, it comes across as a bit creepy.
Yeah, I think that's the word, actually. It's sort of like when a guy asks a girl to dance and she says no, and he just won't go away, sort of feeling to it, when he calls her a feisty piece.
Yeah. She tells Sir Hugh that if he touches either her or Ben, he'll have so many feathers sticking out of him that people will think he's a chicken. Sir Hugh responds by calling her a feisty piece. He directs that to Ben as well, and it's weird.
Two teenage boys sort of talking about the girl right in front of her, sort of thing.
And then he pretends to see goblins behind her. While she's distracted, he hoists her onto his shoulder and walks off with her.
Master, you can't
Don't worry, Pickle. Teams, you won't come to any real harm. Sir Hugh is spellbound and under compulsion to go around rescuing people. Still, I think he's got his hands full this time. Now, onwards, team. There's an adventure to complete.
We know that there's nothing actually untoward going to happen after he walks off, but it doesn't look like there won't be.
It sticks in my brain the first time I watched this, because my parents loved Nightmare as well. And I remember watching this with them both, and my dad making the joke, "Ooh, that's not cricket," when he picked her up, and my mum just going, "No, dear, that's kidnapping."
Yeah. All right, the character is apparently compelled to do it by magic. It's kidnapping by proxy rather than kidnapping directly, but it's still...
Kidnapping by rescue was still kidnapping.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think they found the limits of how far they could take this concept rather quickly.
Yeah.
Is the way we should see that now.
I mean, I also don't fancy his chances, because I get the feeling that she could have just bonked him on the head and kicked him when he was down.
Kicked him in the goblin horns again.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, the character is apparently compelled to do it by magic. It's kidnapping by proxy rather than kidnapping directly, but it's still...
Kidnapping by rescue was still kidnapping.
Yeah.
You know, listeners, there's something that's always struck me about this Hugh scene, rather more than the misogyny, I'm sorry to say. This is the second of Sir Hugh's 4 appearances, and he wasn't really doing a scene with Ben, was he? He was doing a scene with another character, Gwendolen in this case. It's the same thing with his other 2 appearances. In Alex's quest, Sir Hugh is really doing a scene with Scarkill, and in Kelly's quest, Sir Hugh is really doing a scene with Sylvester Hands. I do find this a bit odd because, as the story goes, Mark Knight, when he was hired to play Lord Fear, specifically requested to have a second in-quest character so that he could do some back and forth with the Dungeoneers. And indeed, he was obviously enjoying doing that very much with Sarah, and a damn fine job he did of it too. It's the only chance he really gets in Series 5. Sir Hugh barely interacts with Alex and Kelly later on, but he does say something to them. He doesn't really interact with Ben here at all. It's all with Gwendolen. Or at least that's what I always thought until I heard Kim mention Sir Hugh directing his inappropriate comments about Gwendolen to Ben. Certainly Ben doesn't respond, but it reminds me of the scene between Richard and Motley earlier in the series, where Motley was perving about Gwendolen, and you could see from the rather dirty, cheeky expression on Richard's face that he was very much getting into that with Motley. So yeah, it has to be said, perhaps that's not really a very good, appropriate way for these grown-up actors, like Paul Valentine and Mark Knight, to be interacting with these 12-year-old boys who have come to play Nightmare. And that's in addition to the inappropriateness of such comments being made at all. I was discussing with Rosey quite recently, it would have been quite good to see Sir Hugh actually use his USP in the series more and legitimately rescue Dungeoneers from danger as part of the quest. He really only does that with Alex. That would certainly have been some good use of him. But then, of course, very much my favourite scene with Sir Hugh is the one with Sarah, which really shows him as a well-meaning hazard. She really has to persuade him there not to rescue her. And I think that really is the most interesting use of Sir Hugh. And I'd like to have seen another scene like that somewhere in the series. If you've listened to Nightmare the Lost series as closely as you probably should have done, you might have heard Rosey as Majida saying about Sir Hugh, if you're not careful, he will rescue you right out of the game. And I do find that an interesting possibility for how a quest might have been brought to an end. I'm going to rescue you and take you all the way back where you've come from. No, that's not what we want at all, is it? As Sarah says, we want to go forward, not back. So yes, on the whole, if I could choose to insert a 5th Sir Hugh appearance into Series 5, it would be rather more like his appearance with Sarah than any of his other 3, and it would be least like the one here with Ben. Lastly, about Sir Hugh and Neddy, I could tell from the raw recording for this episode that at least Kim had listened with due diligence to what I had to say on episode 5 about how the effect of Sir Hugh and Neddy riding on was achieved. Mark Knight really starts to incorporate the fact that Neddy isn't really there into the fun dialogue he does for Sir Hugh. You stay over there, Neddy, eat some grass. Yes, we can just imagine him doing that, even though the horse isn't there at all. And then, of course, perhaps my favourite, no, he's gone. Drat that horse, he keeps going off. But fortunately, as has become apparent already, Sir Hugh and Neddy always manage to find each other again.
The team guide Ben through a portal and into the next area.
So Gwendolyn's sole role here was really to give out the password, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, also to scare off Hands.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
Because otherwise he might have tried to steal something. That's something they could have explored a bit more during the series, which is that he's supposed to be a thief. Why is it he never seems to steal from anybody?
Because he's crap at it.
Again, at the beginning, you know, in his first couple of appearances, you got the impression he wasn't crap at it. You got the impression he was actually quite streetwise and quite clever.
Yeah.
Civilization at last, or what passes for it in level 2. You know this place, Pickle?
Think so, Master. Think this is a place called Green Shades, and that house is an inn. And Ben needs food.
Yes, true.
So a tortuously long passive path takes Ben through the Wilden Download Open Air Museum, which is a beautiful museum, by the way. It's quite local to me. And into what Pickle claims to be an inn.
Yeah, getting too slow and made worse by the fact that they filmed it on a very sunny day. So you've got this bright, attractive rural village-scape, which I'm sure is wonderful for tourism, but it looks like a travelogue show. You know, the environment just doesn't provide any menace anymore. It's one of my big criticisms of seasons 4 to 7.
No, the most menacing thing about it is a chicken.
I suppose it kind of follows on the thread from the previous scene when what passes for a threat was made to Sir Hugh.
Yeah, I meant to say it took me a while to work out that meant he was going to have arrows poking out of him.
Yeah. There's supposed to be an inn, and inside is a solitary table with some items on it. A spyglass, a pineapple.
It's a temperate zone.
Oh, why did you do that? It's such a terrible... I don't know who invented that joke. It's awful. But yeah, there's a tray, a mug, and an old jug. And another mug's going to arrive on the scene in a moment, but only after the spyglass scene.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the pineapple gets #knapsacked, and Ben uses the spyglass.
I'm telling you, Scarkle, it was that big girl, you know the one I mean? The one who shot all those goblins last month. I can't think why, they're only treading on the grass. Now, if you can't spot the Dungeoneer, you're bound to spot the girl. She's about 7 foot tall and quite good-looking in a big sort of way.
So you want to nab the big girl as well, then, you fairship, lordship? Lovely. It'll cost you, extra, of course.
I think I'd be willing to pay to see you manage that, Scarkle. You would, of course, look different with an arrow through your head, but it shouldn't affect your thought processes. No. Concentrate on the adventurer. I don't want it getting into level 3. It makes me nervous. And... hold on a second.
Ben, drop it.
Put that down at once. Good heavens, you're going to have to be more discreet than that. You're
coming,
going to
Ben.
survive
Pick up
at the
your
lower
equipment
levels.
on the table. Pick up the equipment, Ben.
Greetings, young wanderer. Your name is Benjamin, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Ah, a fine biblical name. My name is Brother Mace, and I am by way of being a tavern monk, which is why you find me in a tavern.
Ask him what's
I believe in strong religion, strong limbs, and strong ale.
Quite good looking in a big sort of way. Oh, the mind boggles. But I have to say, we have one of the great Lord Sphere zingers here. You will, of course, look different with an arrow through your head, but it shouldn't affect your thought processes. I like that one.
Yeah.
That one makes the episode worth watching just for that line. Definitely a classic Lord Fear put down.
Ben asks Mace if he knows anything about the huge book that Ben's been lugging around with him for most of the level.
Mace seems very keen on this book, and he offers him help if he'd like to make a donation to the church. Ben asks about the horn. Mace replies it could be highly powerful, or it could just be a tatty old drinking horn.
Yeah, you got to give massive kudos to Michael Kuehl for his improvisation here.
He's genuinely, superb in scenes like this.
He is. He's one of the very best. Every other actor on Nightmare could learn from him.
Absolutely.
And the prove your identity, but his reaction to that is very funny too.
What, do you know anything about this horn?
Well, it could be a highly magical and symbolic horn of great power. On the other hand, it could just be a tatty old drinking horn for all I know. But returning to the book, I'm sure you have no use for it. You probably can't even read. So if you would just like to hand it over as a donation, I'd be quite willing to make a small contribution to your quest.
Ask for him.
Ask
Do some more bartering.
Ask him for a spell or more.
Or ask him for more in exchange. We don't think it's worth it.
We want some more in exchange.
Well, I can but give what I have, and as a cleric, of course, it's against my principles just to take it off you, as some people down the dungeon would. So, are you willing to give it to me whilst I think about what it is I might be able to tell you?
Give proof of his own identity, Ben.
Can you prove your identity, please?
Prove my identity? Prove my identity? I've got the robe, I've got the paunch, I've even got the silly rope. What more do you want?
Mace eventually concedes, and he tells Ben that he must seek out the Descendor in order to get to level 3, but he does warn Ben that it is guarded by goblins.
Through that door over there lies a portal that will take you to the very threshold. Now, there, is that enough? Is that enough proof?
Yes. Give him the book.
Yes, that's
Give him the
enough
book, Ben.
Here's the book.
Ah, thank you ever so much. Ooh, goody, it's mine. Well, be on your way, young wanderer, be on your way.
Pick up the horn
and go out the door.
Shall I take the spyglass?
No,
don't
leave
do
that. Right.
Oh, I almost forgot! Oh, good heavens. I forget my own name next. You need a small spell. The spell is sesame. S-E-S-A-M-E. Do you think you can remember that?
Yes, I can.
Well, be on your way. Off on your quest.
Right,
Good
turn
fortune,
right.
my peregrinator.
Okay,
right.
I won't take anything else from the table.
No, turn.
Okay.
Right, turn right, please. That's right, and walk forward, please.
I mean, if you actually think about the information Mace is giving there, it's pretty useless because passive path is going to take them there anyway. It's actually a little bit of a con, that, but he does give them a spell afterwards when he remembers to.
Yeah, I think he genuinely forgot.
It's not the first time that Microcule's had a moment like that, but he rescues it.
Now, there's no way we can prove this either way, listeners. I suppose someone could try asking Michael Cule, but he's probably forgotten after all this time. But I don't think he did forget to give Ben the spell here. I think he deliberately held it back until the book had been handed over. Michael Cule, as he was skillfully improvising his way through this scene, probably had Tim Child in his ear saying, "For goodness sake, Mike, don't give them the spell until they give you the book." They're being far too suspicious and reticent about handing it over, and so Michael Cule then incorporates that into the scene very seamlessly and effectively. As I say, I don't think there's any chance now of finding out the full details there, but there we go. There's my speculation for you, just in case you're interested.
You're outside a very big castle with a forest surrounding it. There's steps leading up to it with bushes all over them, and you're on a field.
Yes, the last dungeon in level 2, team. But I'm afraid Ben's going to have to cross a lot of open ground to get there.
Okay, Ben, sidestep to your right.
That's a goblin horn, Master.
Quickly,
Run
Ben.
forward,
Ben.
run forward.
Pardon?
Run forward.
Run forward.
Run forward.
Passive path takes over, so that's eaten time, I guess. It's set to add that this tower is actually Headingham Keep.
I should know these things, being a Nightmare fan and a part-time historian, but I keep forgetting their names.
Well, fortunately, I do know, and that's why I gave Martin H. a list of nightmare locations to refer to in this episode. You may have noticed him doing so just now. Headingham Castle in Essex really is a wonderful castle to visit and to see on Nightmare. The guidebook tells us it's one of the most complete surviving Norman castles in England, which I can well believe. It makes a wonderful shot here with this open ground to be the last dungeon in level 2, doesn't it? I mentioned that on episode 6, when I was also talking about how the gate tower there was pasted over the keep, as you see it here. But this is the shot of Headingham Keep in its true and magnificent form, and it really is a sight to behold, one of my favourite nightmare locations of all.
This Michael sequence is a little bit more interesting because you've actually got goblin horns, but in the end it still feels a bit hollow. And I've actually got to say, by Nightmare standards, this is rather a cheap little bit of television, isn't it? Because all they're doing is playing a video.
Yeah.
Ben, you're in a room. It's like a puzzle on the floor with rock, paper, and scissors.
Rock, brick, scissors.
Yeah. And there's a door at the other end.
Right. Can you...
Rock, brick, scissors.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I don't know.
Yeah, scissors, because rock, break, scissors. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, quickly.
Okay.
There's always color hats that got the pictures on. I gotta watch my step, cause if I get it wrong, I'll fall away. Fall away. This chasm is so deep, I can't see the floor. I gotta cross this bridge to get to the door in the causeway. The causeway. The causeway.
This team really could do with learning clock face directions, I have to say. The manoeuvring actually isn't bad, but trying to convey the degree to which you need to turn left and right is difficult to get the right degree across. If ever there's a puzzle where you need to get that right...
Causeway.
This is the first time that they almost come a cropper because of manoeuvring.
Yeah.
But it's not the last.
Stop! Ben, turn to your right.
Turn to your right.
Start. Walk forward.
Walk forward. Right.
Okay,
That's
keep
right.
walking.
Keep walking.
Come on,
Left.
Okay, stop, Ben. Stop there. Okay, where am I?
You're in a room. There appears to be another brick wall in front of you. Could be a blocker.
Another thing I mentioned on episode 6 was my preference for this level 2 blocker room over the one you'll see with the subsequent 2 appearances of the level 2 blocker in series 5. So let's bid this location a fond farewell. And indeed, it is a nightmare location that I did give Martin H on that list that seems to have slipped through the net of actually getting mentioned on the podcast. So now I'm going to recapture it myself. This is the exterior of Oxborough Hall near Swaffham in Norfolk, and the particularly interesting thing about the shot here is that the floor is completely fake. What you've actually got there is the moat. Obviously that means the door is completely fake as well. They don't have a door straight out into the moat, because that's what would happen if there was a door there in real life. Take a look at the comparison screenshots that Annie has put on the Nightmare Lexicon, if you don't believe me. And speaking of Annie, it's time to put out some more kudos for her. After listening to our speculations about the Spanish castle locations from Nightmare Series 7 on episode 6 of this series, Annie commented on the Nightmare forum, "Re the Spanish castles, it was Nightmare's own crew that went over and filmed them, as reported in the Quest." And Annie's put a link there to the appropriate issue of the Quest newsletter, and that's made me remember why my first inclination, when Martin asked me, were those Spanish locations used on the Spanish version of Nightmare, was to say, no, they weren't. So not an exchange of images from El Rescate del Talisman, though it's entirely possible that they recommended some locations. I haven't seen much of the third series of ERDT yet, so not sure if the Spanish castles ever made it into that version. Well, I guess, listeners, watch this space for any further updates on that subject, but thanks once again, Annie, for your invaluable Nightmare Locations input.
And there's, I think it's a pork pie on a rock just beside you. So,
Okay, shall I go to the rock and get out the pork pie?
Wait, do not walk forward, though. Just sidestep to your left.
They get really excited about the pie.
In Devon, our pies are magnificent, so of course we're going to get excited about seeing one. Then we realise it's a mere Norfolk pie, and we're all really disappointed. But when from Devon we see a pie, initially we're going to have orgasms.
Never had a pie that good.
Well, we'll just tell your mother that we ate it all.
The hashtag knapsacks the pie, the blocker approaches.
Right, it's coming towards you. Another blocker. Watch out, Ben, it's a blocker.
We don't need no stinking riddles. We barely need to think at all. All we need's a single password. That's all we need to beat this war. Hey, blocker! Leave us kids alone. All in all, you're just another face in a wall. All in all, you're just another face in a wall.
Password. Right, Ben.
Shall I say the password?
Yes,
Say
Morning Star.
Morning Star.
Right,
Ben.
Go on, Ben.
Is there anything else there?
No, there's nothing there. I think so.
Walk forward.
Right, walk forward.
Hang on.
Okay, walk forward.
Walk forward. Okay, stop, Ben. Turn to your left. Okay, walk forward. Stop, Ben.
Okay, where am I?
You're in a room. There's a very big steel metal door in front of you.
Look at the lift.
Yeah, I think it must be the descending device with windows on each side.
Right, gotcha. Your Scarkill's meal ticket now.
Scarkill has Ben at his mercy now, which is bad for Ben, as Scarkill doesn't have any mercy, unless you pay him. As he prepares to put the manacles on the Dungeoneer, the advisors tell Ben to say that he has a horn of beckoning. What is wrong with Season 5 Dungeoneers and not understanding that a horn is there for blowing?
Or drinking.
They then disagree on whether Ben should pretend to be one of Skarkill's troops, and whilst they differ, Skarkill begins to move in. And then, when all the options are exhausted, the team told Ben to blow the horn.
Can I just point out that the Horn of Beckoning Death is an actual item in Dungeons and Dragons?
No, you may not.
Blow the horn!
Blow the horn! Blow the horn, Ben!
Blow the horn.
Oh, I love spitting them out.
Scum, let him go. How would you like
can
to
work
taste
this out.
of the green one?
No, this is not. No, I'll tell you.
Do you want another arrow in your other eye? He's gone. All right then. He's harder to hurt and harder still to kill. Into the descender. This way. Get back. I'll guard
Ask her
you.
how many levels, Ben.
And Ben, remember, this is important. Go back.
Okay, Ben.
This is important. It's
Go, Ben.
winter.
Walk forward.
We're in level 3. So keep going. It's winter, remember.
Winter.
Stop, Ben. Right, Ben, you're in the descending device again, with a wall in front of you and the steel girders all around you.
Okay.
Put the horn on the floor first.
Yep, I will.
Right.
Right, can you stay down now?
Wait a minute.
Hang on.
Right, first we have to look for winter. So directly when we say stop, then you have to say stop, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna look for a winter with like wintry kind.
Okay. You
Yes,
ready?
okay.
Take another step forward then.
All right.
Another.
And that's okay.
Okay, right.
Right, stay down.
Stay down.
Down.
It was just building up to being a bit scary when Skarkill was taking a step towards them, but then Gwendolyn beats him far too easily.
Yeah, that was something I didn't like when they build it up, and it's like it's supposed to be scary, it's supposed to be tense, but then it diffuses immediately.
Yeah, it's Skarkill basically just runs off like a mouse. And oh, that reminds me, joke time. Why is Skarkill like a damaged book? They're both spineless.
Womp, womp, womp.
Not so much what I'd call a joke.
The descender begins its journey, and the advisors look through the passing windows for a snowy landscape. When they spot it, they instruct Ben to shout, "Stop!" The descender grinds to a halt in front of a single door with a familiar adornment above it.
But Master, isn't that a fright night over the door?
I'm afraid all the doors to level 3 have fright nights, Pickle.
This is the point I was making on that previous podcast. Does the Friday Night symbol actually mean the wrong path? Maybe it means the right path.
Because you're trying to get to Lord Fear to defeat him, aren't you?
You're possibly trying to get to the place where Lord Fear has the Fright Nights gathered.
I think it doesn't necessarily mean the wrong path, but the most dangerous path.
Oh, potentially, yeah.
Could do.
Ah, listeners, what a recurring theme this has become on Series 5 of Temporal Discussion. This Fright Night door theory thing. And I've got something of a scoop for you. It really does seem that Martineau's theory about the Fright Night being the correct way to go, because it's the path towards the opposition, holds true only on level 3, where it's your only option anyway, and not on level 2, where you are actually supposed to go through the door without the Fright Night. The Fright Night indicating the dangerous path, as Treguard and Pickle always try to scare the team into realising. Why do I say this with such confidence? Suddenly? Now? Well, I don't want to ruin your secret surprise plans for the upcoming couple of episodes, Martin H., so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I will just tell you, listeners, that Martin H. and I, between us, have discovered a rather interesting, new, never-before-seen primary source which sheds some light on this subject. It was discovered through my extensive, though I'll admit not totally exhaustive, knowledge of behind-the-scenes nightmare information, combined with Martin's contacts, and now I can reveal very significantly that Ben's team seem to have been given rather a severe telling off for ignoring Pickle's warning and taking the right-hand door with the Fright Night over it to get into level 2. To be frank, it seems to me that they were given a right bollocking, though probably not literally, and told to be a lot more careful about listening to Treguard and Pickle's warnings in future. Thinking about Ben in the Descender here, I was very surprised to realise at one point, several decades ago, that this is actually the only time a Dungeoneer takes a second ride in the Descender. The Descender never appears twice in the same quest anywhere else in Nightmare. That was never going to happen in Series 6 or 7, of course, with the very limited use that the Descender gets there. But it could very easily have happened elsewhere in Series 5, couldn't it? I'm sure if Alex had made it to the end of that Level 2 causeway, the descender door would have been there, locked of course, he had the key to unlock it, on the other side of that portal. But as things worked out, only Ben rides in the descender twice. Of course, Sarah, being the other Dungeoneer to get to Level 3, only rode in the descender once because she had the boat ride at the beginning of her quest, Smirkenorf ride to Level 2, and then the descender ride to Level 3. That struck me one day when I was thinking about, yes, of course, they already know to say down to start it, and then they've correctly interpreted Gwendolyn's clue, look through the windows for a wintry landscape, and then say stop. So there we are, just a unique point of interest there. Ben becomes the only Dungeoneer to take a second Descender ride in one quest.
Ben approaches the door and the team are momentarily confused that it doesn't open automatically. They then remember the spell that Mace gave them.
Spellcasting. S-E-S-A-M-E.
The door's just open, Ben. Okay, take one side step to your left. Okay, stop. Right, now walk forward.
We're entering the door with the Fright Night over the top.
Watch him with his spellcasting, any spell. He definitely is one of those advisors who gets really overexcited. He feels like he really is casting magic.
He's properly into it, isn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't actually shout, but he makes sure the whole world can hear him. Spellcasting! I actually like that.
I like it too. I just really like him getting into it.
Big props to him. He's from Exeter. He's going to be better than all the other advisors.
Yeah, it's less Douglas Adams, Zaphod Beeblebrox, and more Roger Hargreaves, Mr. Noisy, really, isn't it? But goodness me, as has been said, you've got to love the enthusiasm, which I do. And indeed all 4 members of Ben's team display such copious amounts of enthusiasm all in their own ways, and as I've mentioned before, I am extremely fond of them, despite the fact that they're a trifle disorganised and rather apt to try to get Ben to speak to the characters too quickly before the characters have really done their lines and revealed how the scene's supposed to go. While I was editing episode 7, I was reminded of something that I particularly like about this team that is not true in the case of many teams. Once they've finished their initial gabbling and they do start listening to the characters, they listen carefully, they process what's being said, they understand how it relates to their quest, to the information they've been given, and they act accordingly. And that's certainly got quite a lot to do with why they win. Of course, that new spin on the Fright Night door theory shows how on that occasion they didn't listen to Pickle, and I don't think they heard Gwendolyn mentioning winter the first time in that scene. She had to repeat it, and then they come to terms with it very well. So I think their problem as a team is over-enthusiasm at some points, but it all comes from a good place, and I do think they're wonderful.
The Descender Room is actually Carew Castle in Pembrokeshire, Wales. Thanks for that one, Annie. And we've reached Winteria now, which is Framlingham Castle in Suffolk, which is the same area as the path home was in Series 4.
Yeah, I recognise it, yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit here about Winteria because I have a theory about this, that it was never really intended to be a winter setting. It's just that
they happened to film on the day that it was snowing.
Yeah, I think they got lucky and they probably came up with the character of Cassandra after the fact.
It's quite possible that.
I must admit, I love Winteria. I wish it had actually got used more.
Yeah.
Master, where in the underworld did Ben get that clue?
Surely you realise, Pickle, that the powers that be have some influence even in level 3, and Ben needs that cloak in this icy place.
Ben, you're on a snow-covered field with hills all around you and an old ruined castle, but we've got to hurry up. So,
okay, well, there's a
tree stump.
Tree stump with something on it. So, slide step to your right, Ben.
Ben is suddenly wearing a rather handsome red cloak. It appears to be the blanket that briefly appeared in previous episodes.
This is the only time in Nightmare a Dungeoneer magically receives an extra item of clothing from the powers that be. And thank God for that. I have to tell you, listeners, I do not like this cloak at all. I'd much rather see Ben questing in his red t-shirt and his standard boys' trousers from George and Asda or whatever it is. I do think the cloak makes him look rather stupid, particularly as it is incredibly unnecessary. Now, it's already been established that the Dungeoneers can't really be physically affected by anything in the world of Nightmare. Ben doesn't feel the cold at all, and he doesn't need that cloak in this icy place. But even if he did, this initial outside area is the only part of Winteria that is actually icy. The cloak looks extremely out of place in the rest of the Winteria rooms in the next episode, and this goes back to what I was saying on episode 6. Winteria as a location doesn't really work because the rooms after this aren't wintry. They're just old recycled Series 4 rooms with absolutely no attempts to make them look at all cold and wintry, and I do find that very disappointing. I'm going to give Martin H. a list of those Winteria rooms for use on episode 9. Of course, there is the old block and tackle room as well, where Isandra appears, where you can see the wintry landscape through like the holes in the walls. But that's this Framlingham area as well, just pasted onto the block and tackle bit. It does not provide any variety, and I find it does not create Winteria as a believable world, as a nice atmospheric level 3, which, as was being said on episode 6, adds so much to Nightmare, if that is creative. And really, I don't think it is consistently, reliably, completely at all in Series 5 or 6. Indeed, if you listen to my commentary for episode 9 of this series, you'll hear me being about as negative as I ever get pre-Series 7. Really entirely thanks to Winteria and what I think about it, how little I think of it, or how little I think of the way it's pulled off. As an idea, I think it's got a lot of potential, but that's largely unrealised. Having said that, I still love Series 5 a lot. It's always been one of my favourites. Second place or third place for me. Mostly I absolutely love it. But Winteria, disappointing.
The production team have gone to great lengths to maintain the illusion that Ben is actually walking on snow, including crunching footsteps sound, which makes it a bit of a shame that he is not leaving any.
It looks amazing in the snow, though, doesn't it? It really does.
It does, because the snow's so deep there. So it was obviously a pretty deep and dark winter that year.
So the team guide Ben towards the tree stump, upon which are a spyglass, a bar of gold, a dagger, some grapes, which get #knapsacked.
Clearly avoid the dagger. That's one you can just treat as a negative automatically.
You'll see in the next episode that Jonathan does actually want to take the dagger. John puts his foot down and says no, absolutely not, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Jonathan gives his reason for wanting to take the dagger as trying to get a good mix of clue items. Where's he got that from? Perhaps it was from Treguard back on level 1, rather unwisely telling the team to choose their clue objects for variety. Something that's come back to make a little bit of awkward viewing there. Whatever variety you're going to have in your clue objects, never include the variety of taking a weapon unless there is a clue to do so.
And then Ben opens and reads the scroll.
It says, give a dog a bone. Have we got that?
Yeah. Okay, is there a bone on the table?
No, there isn't a bone on the table.
Okay, can you tell us
what there is once more?
Look, put the spyglass to the eye shield, yeah?
Okay.
Put the spyglass to the eye shield.
Okay.
Seek and destroy, Scarkill, seek and destroy. And if I find you've been taking bribes, I'll make giblets of you and your goblins. Now be gone. I have business with a lady. Silence, mindless ones! Even for a mountainous intellect, this takes concentration.
Shall we drop it? Shall we drop it?
Greetings, madam. Do I find you well?
As well as may be. It is unseasonably warm for this time of dungeon. What wish you, my lord?
A minor favor. Nothing of portent. An adventurer, a dungeoneer is questing into your kingdom. I want it stopped. I will, of course, express my appreciation in the usual manner, and I take it I have your cooperation.
Why not? Dungeoneers leave portals open. Heat invades. I abhor the little pests.
Oh, good. I'm going to have to break off now, madam. My detection
Drop
device.
it, Ben.
Fear says he'll show his appreciation in the usual manner.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's Double Entendre of the Week, second prize.
she doesn't seem best pleased to see him either.
No.
Despite some of the speculations that go on about the relationship between them, it's actually pretty clear, especially from one of the books, that Lord Fear and Lysandra don't like each other.
Yeah.
Was it The Forbidden Gates?
Yes, it is.
They both appear in, and Lysandra is constantly undermining Fear. You know, she's Starscream and he's Megatron, that sort of thing. They don't get on at all.
So yes, as we've discussed, this is the Ice Queen Isandra, a powerful sorceress who rules over the realm of Winteria.
I have to say it though, Lysandra may be the crappiest name in Nightmare history. They really just couldn't think of anything else to make her sound related to ice, except, let's just put an I sound at the beginning of Sandra.
I mean, it's a nice name, but a bit weird. So yes, Isandra is played by Juliet Henry Massey, who also plays Gwendolyn. We'll have a lot more to say about Isandra in the next episode, but for now...
Ooh, that bell made it sound like Fear had hit Ben with a remote fireball for a moment. Do you remember me saying in season 2, the very first time they used the bell for temporal disruption, it was just as Mildred was putting a magic item into her well way, and so they dong, and I thought, oh my god, has she killed him?
Wet and worms make a spell. Conjure up a deep, dark well.
Warning, team, a complete temporal disruption imminent.
Suddenly I realised that was the sound of the episode ending.
Oh, Master, Ben's frozen.
Of course he isn't, Pickle. He's got that nice warm cloak on. Ah, I see what you mean. It's a phase shift, and it's caught our adventurers in mid-decision. Well, they won't be making up their minds just yet. Well, what are their chances, Pickle?
I wish we were in some of the hotter parts of level 3, Master. Lysandra's got some very chilling ways about her, and if she's formed a pact with the opposition, then she could turn out to be more than Ben can handle.
Well, you know what they say. When the going gets cold, the tough get frozen. Want to find out if Ben and co can crack the ice? Yes, I thought you would. Then you know what to do about it, don't you?
The credits roll over a picturesque castle covered in snow.
This is Framlingham Castle in the snow again, viewed from a bit further away this time, back over the lake. But yeah, it is the same castle, and it's apparently the only location they've got at all for Winteria. Or is it? Well, in practical terms, in this episode and the next one, yes it is. But it didn't have to be, quite obviously. In the final episode of this series, we see Bungay Castle in Suffolk in the snow.
Hurry, Kelly, quickly, to the door!
And also in this episode, we see, as I've mentioned, that Dungeoneer landing pillory room from Series 4 with icicles hanging from the ceiling. Now, why on earth couldn't they do that in episode 9? With Orford Castle, Framlingham Castle, Poor House. Hang some icicles from the ceiling so it looks like Winteria. Is that really too much to ask? Well, clearly it is.
Nightmare was followed that day by an episode of Porky Pig. And then, of course, Home and Away.
Yes.
You know we belong together.
You and I forever and ever, no matter where you are, you're my guiding star. Did you put that in on purpose to tempt me, Martin? Were you seeing if you could set off the Jake box? Well, either way, it worked. What a shame we can't finish the whole song together, at least on this particular episode. But who knows, perhaps some other time.
So we will talk a bit more about Isandra next episode, but I think it's safe to say that Juliet Henry Massey's acting style is a bit more suited to Isandra than it is to Gwendolyn.
I still find her a bit underwhelming, but she is better at playing Isandra. And she does look rather splendid in that headdress and jewelled neckband. I'm not too sure if the flame-like strands on the headdress have me thinking of ice, though.
No.
I've always rather liked that because I find it indicative of her fire, Isandra's fire.
Blue fire, you understand. The fire that freezes rather than burns.
That's what her hat reminds me of.
before the credits, we get that exchange between Treguard and Pickle over Ben being frozen, and it irritates me. It makes Treguard look stupid again. He seems to have lost his 20 IQ points it's getting an assistant. But the worst bit of it is when Pickle says, Isandra's got some very chilling ways about her. Oh, shut up, Pickle. This strange obsession TV series in the 70s, 80s, and 90s of forcing in cold weather puns in any story has snow in it. It's just so old and tired.
Yeah.
It was tired in 1991. Every kid's cartoon, from Scooby-Doo to the Transformers to Real Ghostbusters, does the same line of jokes whenever snow appears.
I am going to stop He-Man cold.
Observation, the term temporal disruption has been abandoned now, if you notice, and they're now replacing it with phase shift. Does this mean, from this point on, we really need to rename this podcast?
No.
What a stupid f***ing question.
So yeah, the episode actually isn't bad at all. It's just it's got some very low points in it. It rattles along fairly smoothly for the most part when the eye shield isn't getting in the way. And there's genuinely very funny moments.
It's just the making people look stupid I can't get away with. Like, if you're watching Nightmare as a kid, you're at least, you've got some intelligence about you.
There is that character deterioration thing that we've discussed a fair bit. As I said, there's some funny Mace's scene is really good. And the one-liner from Lord Fear that I mentioned earlier, that caps things off beautifully. There's some new locations, which gives us some freshness to it. I do wish the sun wasn't shining in so many of them. And it helps that this is, of course, a very good team whose only weakness is perhaps a tendency to overthink, as in that request to Mace to prove his identity. But their strengths include the most important ones for helping the proceedings be entertaining, which is solid communication, plenty of initiative, and they really get into it. And they're from Exeter.
I don't think that's got anything to do with it, in fairness, Martin.
So it's not that bad a lot of the time, but then you've got that rather creepy business with Sir Hugh and Gwendolyn. You've got Gwendolyn being a complete dunderhead in the scene with Sly Hands. Sly Hands not able to remember whether he is a dunderhead or a genius of nature in the same scene. Pickle and Treguard not knowing where the camera is. People making noise walking in snow, but not actually leaving any footprints on the snow. This is one of the most varied in terms of quality that I've ever seen.
Yeah, like it's either absolutely on it or absolutely off it. There's no in between.
Yeah.
By the low standards of the middle seasons, this episode gets 8 out of 10. By the standards of the better years, 6.
We do have some very good stuff coming up in the next episode, though.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
If you'd enjoyed the podcast, please give us a rating and review on your platform of choice. It really helps us to grow our audience by reaching others who might be interested.
Our Mastodon is topspicy.social/@nightmarepod.
And you can also now follow us on Blue Sky, where we're nightmarepod.bsky.social.
We're also Nightmare Pod on Threads and Twitter, and our Instagram is Temporal Discussion.
If you want to support the podcast, we're Nightmare Pod on Patreon.
Speaking of Patreon, here's a shout out to Keepers of the Book of Quest, David N. Rabbit, Paul McIntosh, Peter Pulsford, and Scott Evans.
Advisors Benjamin Bloom, David Thompson, Kim Harder, which is a silly surname, Kim Stewart-Crossley, who's she, Lord Entropy, where the O is a 0, Paul Craddy, Peter Sidorn, and Pig Venus.
And let's not forget Dungeoneers Peter Corridge, Dan Heath, and Adam Battersby.
Support us on Patreon at Dungeoneer level or above to get your name mentioned on the podcast. Higher level perks also receive merchandise, have access to exclusive episodes, and if you pledge as a Keeper of the Book of Quests, we'll even offer you the chance to be a guest on the podcast. What more could you want?
I know, right? Our website is nightmarepod.co.uk.
If you're looking for temporal discussion merchandise, and let's face it, who isn't? That includes t-shirts, stickers, and other products. It's at nightmarepod.redbubble.com.
You can email us at podcast@nightmarepod.co.uk.
And just keep telling yourself, it's only a podcast.
Isn't it?
We lost your audio for a moment.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Shame.